Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Ashley. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right. So I want to welcome you all. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us. On behalf of Academic Services in partnership with Parent Academy, we just want to again thank you all for taking this time. My name is Elizabeth Blank. I am the elementary math supervisor, and I'm excited to be here with you all tonight. So we'll go ahead and get started. And like Ashley said, if you have any questions, please use the chat, and I'll make sure that all of our questions get answered to the best of my ability at the end of this. So tonight we're going to focus on preparing for the elementary math end of year assessment for grades 3 through 5. So here's our agenda for this evening. We'll be able to provide an overview of FAST as it pertains to math for grades 3 through 5. We'll discuss some of the expectations and also explore several of the different item types in all three of those grade levels. And then we'll end our evening talking about some helpful resources that you can use with your students and also some support you can provide at home to continue their success. So as we discussed a little bit earlier, here's some of our community agreements. Your mics are muted, but please feel free to utilize that chat. And I always say anytime I have a get together with families that this is a safe place not to know the answers. So I welcome any questions you may have. And my goal for this evening is that we'll all gain a better understanding of the Florida Assessment of Student Thinking, what we know as the FAST, and also that you'll be able to explore the different resources to best support your student or students at home. So let's go ahead and jump into an overview of the FAST assessment. So what is FAST online testing for anybody that's new to it? So the FAST online testing, this is when Florida initiated our best state standards a few years ago, along also came the Florida Assessment of Student Thinking, or FAST, which is a progress monitoring assessment for reading and math that will be administered from pre-K all the way through 10th grade. And then, so in grades K through 5, FAST occurs 3 times per year. If your student has been here all year, they had their PM1 at the beginning of the year. PM2 comes around winter time, and then we end our year with our PM3. This tracks your students' progress in learning the required mathematics materials and skills within our Florida's benchmarks of excellent student thinking. These are referred to as the BEST standards. So when we get this upcoming PM3 that we'll be taking, this will provide yourselves, your students, and teachers and schools and administrators a summative score that will accurately measure your students' mastery of the best standards at the end of the school year. So the FAST online testing is taken computer-based, and it's also an adaptive test. So in a computer adaptive test, each question is selected by a computer algorithm that meets the grade level's test blueprint. And we'll discuss that a little bit later, what the blueprint is for each grade level. And this addresses the math standards, and it's based on student performance on previously administered items. So a computer adaptive test is tailored to the student's ability based on whether the student responds successfully to the preceding items or sets of items. So each time a student answers a question, his or her response helps determine what the next question or the next set of questions will be for that specific student. So here's an overview of our testing schedule for this year. We discussed earlier our PM1 was in August and September, the beginning of the academic school year. PM2 came in winter time. It opened in December and it ended at the end of January. And then our upcoming final assessment for the school year, which is PM3, the testing window for grades 3 through 5 opens May 1st and it ends May 30th. So your student will complete the assessment during that window at some point. Testing dates are assigned by each school testing administrator, and they'll vary from school to school. So the specific dates for your student will be communicated to you by your child's school. So if you have any questions about when is my third grader taking the FAST math, please reach out to your child's school or teacher to get some clarification on that. For the FAST PM3 assessment, grades 3 through 5 students will have one testing session for each one of the content areas. So for ELA, they'll have one testing, and then so for math, it'll be 1 day of testing. The average time that it takes students is between 100 to 120 minutes. But please know that students are giving the adequate time that they need to complete the items. So it's also important to know that grades 3 through 5 are not permitted to use calculators during the testing session. Students practice the math benchmarks in their classrooms without calculators, so this would not be something new for them or something that would catch them off guard. We do not use calculators in any of our 3 through 5 classrooms. In grades 4 through 5, so 4th and 5th grades, they will be provided with a reference sheet. So on the picture on the right is one of the example of the 5th grade mathematics reference sheet. This includes some customary and metric and time conversions they may need to reference, as well as some helpful formulas such as area, perimeter, and volume for 5th grade. All students, 3rd through 5th, are also provided with scratch paper as they need to use for this computer adaptive test to work out their math problems. So let's talk about some reporting. So the FAST performance results are reported on a scale score, and then they're grouped into 5 achievement levels. So you see that here that there's a range within each achievement level of where the student places. So when you see your parent report, you may see, oh, my student has a scale score of 200 and they're a level 3. So you can see how the range, are they at the high level or the low level of that achievement level. So I want to talk about the 5 achievement levels. And if you've had a student that is previously taking a FAST assessment, you may be familiar with these. But we range from 1 to 5. 1 being students that are well below grade level. These are students that are just beginning to access the grade level content and will need a lot of scaffolding and support with the content. A level 2 are still students that are below grade level. They're demonstrating some success with the content, but still below satisfactory level. Our students that are level 3 are demonstrating on grade level success. However, they still may need additional support in the next grade or the next course. And then we have what we call proficiency. So level 4 is considered proficiency, and that means that students are scoring above satisfactory level with the grade level content. And then our level 5 is for our exemplary performance, which is demonstrating mastery of the grade level content. In mathematics, there is not a requirement for promotion of a level 2 or higher. I believe that is for ELA 3rd grade is for receiving a level 2 or higher for promotion in ELA. All right, so now that we talked about some of those expectations, let's take a few minutes and review some more of the expectations along with some of these item types. It's always exciting to see what are the students going to be exposed to. So some testing expectations. So day of the test, students will be provided with that blank scratch paper. They'll be provided with pencils, online, and of course the laptop to keep them focused. Also, the online mathematics reference sheets will be given and available only for grades 4 and 5 in our elementary schools. And then it's very important to know that students are prohibited from having any electronic or recording devices on them during the test sessions and or breaks. So we always encourage students to leave home any cell phone, any smartwatches, any type of item that can be a distractor and can cause for their test to be invalidated. So when students start exploring this computer adaptive test, the online testing platform, they will have the ability to make some modifications as needed for them. So they do have the ability to adjust the test settings with such features as like changing the background color, the pointer on the mouse, the print size of the font. They can also have access to computer-based testing tools. So they have the ability to highlight certain things, to strike through. So if they're reading a word problem and they want to kind of use some text strategies that they've done with breaking apart word problems, they have a line reader and a zoom feature. If a graphic is too small for them, they're able to zoom in and see something a little bit larger. So it's also important that we talk about testing accommodations for subgroups of students. So accommodations, our FAST Mathematics assessment platforms allows for the following assistive tools. These would be tools and accommodations for students that have either an IEP or a 504 plan. But the FAST PM does allow for text to speech, for masking, and for oral presentation. Of course, all of these are specific to a student's IEP or 504 as it is documented there. So we talked a little bit earlier, we talked about a blueprint. So I want to show you, this is really what they call a benchmark coverage for each grade level. So you'll see what I have here is outlined is that each grade level has a specific portion of the test that encompasses a set of benchmarks. Yes, Ms. Glover, this will be shared out. So for grade 3, we see that all 4 of the major components will be equal weighted is what we call this. So we'll have number sense and additive reasoning being about 25% of the test, number sense and multiplicative reasoning, another 25, fractional reasoning, another 25, and then we have what we call our geometry, measurement, data analysis section, which is another 25. In 4th grade, it's pretty much split into 3 main components. You have number sense and operations with whole numbers, which is about a good 33 to 35% of the test. You have number sense and operations with fractions and decimals. So now we've gone from just whole numbers to we're also working with fractions and decimals in 4th grade. And then finally that geometry, measurement, and data analysis section as well for them. And finally for 5th grade, we see 5th grade is similar to how 3rd grade is broken apart with 4 equally weighted components. We have number sense and operations with whole numbers, number sense and operations with fractions and decimals. We have algebraic reasoning, and then finally our geometric reasoning, measurement, and data analysis. But you'll see for all 3 grade levels, the average number of items is between 35 and 40 questions per student. So it's not like the student is taking an assessment that's 120 questions. The average is about 35 to 40 questions based on their performance. Remember, it is still adaptive. So just depending on how they are performing is the next item they'll get. So let's talk about some item types. All of these item types that I'm going to go with share with you are all available through the sample test that's available on the Florida DOE. And at the end of this session, when we go through the resources, I'm going to guide you on how to go specifically to these grade level sample tests so you can do these with your student as well. So here are the 9 different item types that are available for math items. We'll go through one by one and I'll tell you the explanation of each type as you see some examples for each grade level. So multiple choice is what, of course, us as parents are most familiar with. That's how most of our tests were. Students are also exposed to multi-select, equation editor, and editing task choice, matching items, which are mostly in a table, selectable hot text, one called grid or graphic response item display. And then our 2 new ones are called graphing items and fraction model items. So let's look at our most familiar, multiple choice. This, like I said, is very similar. This is what we're used with testing is an A through D option. And with multiple choice, students choose one correct answer from the options from the question, and the computer test will only allow the students on multiple choice to select one answer choice. So it does limit their responses. So I'll take a pause when I get to these to allow you to kind of look over your student's grade level. And these are from the samples. So these are tests that in the past could have been seen on the FAST. Feel free to challenge yourself if you want to solve any of them while we're going through it. It's never a bad time to do some math. You'll notice as you explore some of these sample items that the requirement of comprehension of reading word problems is a big factor that our teachers work really hard on, making sure students are able to read the word problems and make sense of what the question is asking them. So as you're working with your students at home, make sure that as you're helping with homework or going over a blended learning platform with them, ask them, what is the question asking me and what is the important information in the word problem that I need to know to be able to solve? So you really help them have that metacognitive thinking of what are the steps I take to solve a word problem and understand the context, not just be able to pull out numbers. Do I understand the context of the question? All right, so that was multiple choice. I'm going to move forward and look at our next item, which is multi-select. So for a multi-select item, the student is directed to select all the correct answers from among a number of options. So what we do know is this will always be more than 4 options. These items are different from multiple choice, which allow the student to only select one correct answer. These items appear in the online assessment as well as paper-based accommodations. And when I speak of paper-based accommodations, this may be a student that has an IEP that does require a paper-based, so I want to make sure we acknowledge of what type of items would be on that as well. But for a majority of our students, it will be a computer adaptive test. So it's important to know with multi-select items, it does not limit the student on their answer choices. So a student, it could be all of the items, it could be all the answer choices, and they have to choose all of them. It could be 2 or up to, like I said, up to all of them. So it does not limit them on the number they're allowed to select. And I'm going to move forward. So now we have equation editor. We may think of this from our own schooling as maybe like kind of fill in the blank. So with an equation editor, the student enters a number, a variable, an expression, or an equation as appropriate to the test item in a response box. The student is presented with a toolbar or a keypad that includes a variety of mathematical symbols that can be used to create a response. The response box may be separate from the text of the item, or it may be embedded within the text of the item. And then it's important to know that for paper-based accommodations, this item is modified. So the student writes a response in a response box. We're also at the end of this session going to look at some resources to really help your student get familiar with using these keypads and inputting different requirements. You'll see in this 3rd grade example we have, it's requiring a fraction to be inputted. So what the student must do is click the fraction bar that's at the bottom of that keypad and then input the numerator and the denominator into that. So something that students, we've been working really hard this year and in the past to really help students become familiar with how to interact with these different keypads. In this 4th grade example, you'll see this is what we call a full keypad. So there's a lot more mathematical symbols to use in interactions. And in this one, it's actually asking the student to create an equation. So it's important for students to now know what is an equation. So we come back to that vocabulary. An equation must contain an equal sign. So I can't just write 5y, that would be an expression. It has to have that equal sign to show the balance. Here's 2 examples of 5th grade equation editors. We see one has the image with the volume, where they're just inputting a number. And then there's another example from 5th grade, similar to our 4th grade one that has it where they're actually responding with an equation as well. In this equation, though, it does require that student also uses the full keypad to use the parentheses to create that equation. We've got a great resource from Cambium, which is the writers of the FAST assessment, that's going to really help you practice at home with your students. And teachers have been implementing that in the classrooms as well. So let's talk about our next item, which is an editing task choice. This is something a little bit new, maybe for us as parents, but with the editing task choice, the student clicks a drop-down menu containing options to complete an equation or expression or even a statement The student then selects the correct response from the drop-down menu, and this is also modified for, I believe it has bubbles on a paper-based assessment for any student with an accommodation. So you'll see in this third grade example, the student must read the task, read the problem, and then they have to use the drop-down to first fill in the key to create a scaled picture graph, as well as choose what would the picture graph look like from these drop-down options in each one of these categories. In fourth grade, here's a similar one where they have a list of 3 numbers and they're having to order them from greatest to least. So each drop down would have a set of numbers for them to select. And then in fifth grade, they're completing ways to represent numbers in different ways by selecting the units for that multi-digit number. This specific item students do get a lot of practice on their unit assessments as well as this matching. And matching is similar to a multi-select. It's a different format. So in the matching item, students check a box to indicate whether information from a column header matches information from a row. It's important to know that the number of correct answer options per row or per column may vary. So if you take a look at the fourth grade example we have here, we have 2 decimal numbers. And it says the directive is to match each decimal with its equivalent fraction, but there's 3 options. So in this one, it's requiring not just 1 per row, it's requiring 2 answer choices per row to show that equivalence. I will say a lot of times our students do struggle on these of selecting multiple options per row or per column. And here's a fifth grade example as well, matching expressions to the statement. All right, so here is a selectable hot text. This is also an item type they have for ELA for their literacy test, and it looks a little bit different. So in mathematics, selectable hot text is where the student is directed to click on one or more correct answers from among a number of options. When the student hovers over the option, sometimes it's a phrase, sometimes it's a sentence or just numbers or an operation symbol, the text will highlight blue. This indicates the text is selectable or what we call hot. The options may be presented in various ways. It may be a list, it may show a worked out algorithm as you see in these two or this example, and then the student can click on an option to select it. So I'm going to show you an example. If you see here on this third grade, when I hover over one of them, it turns blue. And it means I can select it, but you'll see it turned purple on the part that I actually selected as my hot text. To answer that first part of the A, where it says click on the part of the work where Angela's error first appears. Similar on the fourth grade example. Both of these items are 2-part, so the selectable hot text is only for the part A, and then you'll see it goes back down to the equation editor for part 2, where I'm using the keypad. Here's a fifth grade example of selectable hot text. And in this one, I'm not actually clicking a part, I'm actually just clicking the operation. So when I hover, I would hover over the operation symbols of subtraction, addition, or division. And then that way I'm able to select those and then respond with my equation editor afterwards. It's also important to know, I know when the students are doing their practice assessment, on the DOE website we're going to share, that it does not allow them to progress without answering each part. So it's not as if they didn't understand part A, they could move forward. It would redirect them to answer both components or all the options available before they can progress forward. So here's another item. This is what we call our grid or our graphic response item display. This is one that has been around for a while with computer adaptive testing, and they're making some shifts to a new, more updated version. So with the grid, what we call those, it is the student uses a point, a line, or an arrow tool. So if you'll see at the top of this little graph up here, it has these blue buttons where it says add a point or delete. So these are tools they interact with to then complete this graph that's here. The item type may also require the students to select numbers, words, phrases, or images, or additionally they may do a drag and drop feature to place them into this graphic. So here was one example from fifth grade where I am still interacting with these tools to complete this. So for each one of these coordinate points that I'm putting on here, I'm having to select add a point, drop it to where it matches my coordinate pair on the coordinate plane. So a newer version of a similar item is called graphing item. In a graphing item, the student creates a graph or a number line. The student can create a bar graph, a line plot, or a pictograph by clicking on parts of a display. So I'm going to show you this at third grade example. The student first has to read the problem, and then the directive is to click on full or half tickets to create a pictograph using the data that's given in this table. So when the student hovers over each one of these tickets next to the or in this graphic, it highlights and allows them to click it to fill the tickets. So after they've done that, this is what it should look like, where they've completely or partially filled the tickets to match the corresponding scale of what each image is. In this example, each image represents 6 tickets. So an extension of graphing item is also using the number line and creating plots. So we see a third grade example where they're creating an equivalent fraction on a number line. So it gives them an image, and then it's having them create the plot or plot the point where the equivalent fraction would be. In fourth grade, this example, they're given 4 decimal numbers, and they're dragging this point P that's given down here at the bottom of this number line to represent the largest decimal. So using that understanding of ordering and comparing decimals, and then plotting the decimal on the number line. So then they would drag that point P up to the number line to create that. And then here's an example of a graphing item for fourth grade where they're completing a graph. So they're actually creating a graph based off the data given, and they're creating this line plot. So with this interaction, they're able to click any one of these boxes in this dotted grid to create an X over the value that's given in the data chart to the left. A similar item, we see this one is dealing with fractions. You'll also note that not all of the fractions are listed on the number lines. So that also takes students understanding how to label number lines flexibly. In fourth grade, they're working with fractions for this example. And then a fifth grade example, we're working with decimals, very similar interaction as well though. Another one where I'm using the point is for this fifth grade where I am now using the context of this item to grid the plot or plot a point on the coordinate plane. So one of the newest item types is called a fraction model item. They actually didn't have any of these available on the FAST sample item test. However, I've done some work with the state, so I was able to get a picture of what this looks like. So I've represented it for you all so you can see what this interaction will look like. I believe this year this is going to be what we call a field tested item. So students will be exposed to it, but it will not count against them if they don't know how to, if they're not correct on it. It's just the state testing different item types for you know, the effectiveness of resulting in the data with that. So for this one, if the statement may say represent 3/4, the student or the student creates a fractional model, excuse me. The item type either provides the student the model that is already divided into equal parts, or it allows the student to construct the model by choosing the number of equal parts. So you'll see with this plus and minus buttons, the students are able to select the number of rectangles or models that they need for the fraction, and then partition it into the number of parts based off what the given fraction is. This can be a fraction less than 1, as such as we see here is 3/4. It could also be a fraction greater than 1 where they need more than one rectangle to represent the wholes. After they've done this, it may require the student, after they partition the whole, to also shade the whole to represent 3/4. So they would click within each one of those partitions to then represent what that fractional model would look like. And then finally, as you've seen in some of our examples, they have the opportunity to engage with multi-interaction items. So this isn't always necessarily a part A or part B. Sometimes within one item, it may have different interactions from different types of items within it. So you'll see in the third grade example, it has a multiple choice as well as that equation editor. In 4th grade, we have one of the editing task choice along with equation editor, and the similar for 5th grade as well. So those are our 9 different item types. I know that was a lot, but it's always valuable for us as adults and parents to know how we can best support students, because testing is a lot different from even when I was in school. So let's look at some FAST resources and some of the things that I gathered for today's presentation and how you can help support your student at home. So first, if you're not familiar, this is the Florida DOE's FAST website. It's flfast.org. This houses helpful resources for teachers, students, and families to prepare for any of the progress monitoring assessments and different tools that they would need. So once you go to flfast.org, which I'm going to refer to as floridafast.org, you'll get to this main website that you see here. And then for families, if you click on this image right here, it is called Florida Statewide Assessment. Within that, you'll go to this next page that has the Florida Assessment, the FAST portal, basically. You'll have testing information, sample items, assessment resources, and this is where we can access the practice test that you just got to experience some of those questions from. So you'll click on this icon that says Students and Families. And then that second tile at the bottom says Sample Items, and you could click there and go in to take any of the grade level practice tests. If you do have any younger children at home, this is also the place where you would go to view sample items for VPK through 2nd grade. They don't have the computer adaptive testing site for them to practice, but they do have a print version that you could view the sample items from their computer-based test. But for us, for our 3 through 5 students, we would click on this right-hand side where it says take a sample test for grades 3 through 10. And then it would walk you to go through this where you would go and you almost are looking exactly what the students would see, where you're able to modify the testing, the font size, the background, anything you would need for an accommodation. And then you begin your online test. You drop down to choose your grade level. Now, the one thing this will not give parents or students taking it at home, it does not give you the answers. So this is more for interaction purposes and for to really practice understanding how to interact with a computer adaptive test. So we talked earlier about those keypads and how this is something new for students, and it may be challenging for some students of entering the equation editor using these 2 different keypads. So there's a wonderful resource. If you'll see here, if you go to flfast.org/resources, you'll get to a search screen. And then if you type in the 2 words equation editor, you'll come up with this second search result, which is the equation editor item tutorial. This is built by Cambium, which is the testing platform, the vendor that creates the Florida FAST, and it helps students really interact with different steps to using these full keypads. So when you get to the main screen, after you've clicked on that equation editor item tutorial link, I will say that the header on there overlaps a little bit at the top, and I know this is kind of small on your screen, but the first thing you need to drop down is to choose your grade level. So it'll let you choose 3 through 5, and you see that's kind of what I have in that drop down menu right there. And then to the right of that is another drop down where you can drop down which type of practice do you want. My 2 recommendations is to practice fractions and parentheses. Students pretty much know how to input a number into there, but practicing equations and inputting fractions, being fractions, like we said, even mixed numbers and fractions is very helpful. And this basically what this resource does is it gives them a step-by-step guide. And then after they've followed all the steps and interacted with the keypad that's on the screen, at the end they do get to check it to make sure that they were correct and they did it appropriately. So as much practice as students can get with that, we can kind of eliminate that as a barrier for them when they take their PM3. At the bottom of that same Students and Families page on the flfast.org, you'll see that there is a parent portal. So if you are not familiar, this is the DOE's Family Portal, where you can access all of your students' data from their PM testing. So important things to know is to access this, your child's teacher in school should be able to give you all of this information. So you are going to go to this website to be able to get to it, and you need to have some important information about your child. You'll need their student ID number, their date of birth, the full name that appears on their official school records, but most importantly, you need an access code, and that access code comes from your child's teacher or the testing administrator at your school. When you get to that family portal, here's what it'll look like, and it'll actually ask you for that access code. So I encourage you to reach out to your child's school if you do not have that currently and would like to go ahead and get on the family portal. You'll be able to see the past PMs they've taken, and as well as the information. This is what it looks like when you get into it. So that was pretty much the resources from the Florida DOE to help support at home with Florida FAST. We also have our duvalschools.org. We have a new website this year, so if you're not familiar, if you click up at the right where those three little bars are next to the top search bar is where we get to our departments page. When you get to our departments page, there's a Students and Families department and page you can go to with your helpful resources. You'll see there they have Family Portal on there as well as all your academic areas you can go and explore. And this is also where you can go to find single sign-on and the blended learning applications that your students are using at school. And we encourage additional use at home to really enhance student skills and maximize their learning. So if you have younger students, kindergarten uses Waterford Reading Academy. Grades 1 and 2 use iReady. Grades 3, 4, and 5 use Renaissance, which is Freckle. And all students K through 5 with our McGraw-Hill core curriculum have access to a program called Redbird through McGraw-Hill, which really helps students build their path towards algebra proficiency. So how can you help at home? So we encourage, of course, spending time at home completing lessons on their blended learning platform for their grade level. They also have fluency practice in grades 3 through 5 on that Freckle platform as well. So that's great things to kind of, when you're at home while the dinner's cooking, hey, go ahead and spend 10 minutes on Freckle practicing multiplication, division, fluency. Other ways that you can help with fluency at home, if you have a K2 student, addition and subtraction are our foundation for fluency in those grade levels. In 3 through 5, we have a couple options. You have, of course, multiplication and division. The quicker they are with being procedurally fluent with their multiplication and division facts, the easier it's going to be for them when they get to those more complex operations. Skip counting. So, of course, that's the foundation of multiplication and division, is knowing my skip counts. Can they skip count by 5s? Can they skip count by 6s and 7s, which are a little trickier? Knowing how to count by fractions and by decimals. So not just counting by whole numbers, but now can you count, if I say the number 3/4, can you continue to count up 3/4, 4/4, 5/4, 6/4? And this will help them as they start learning more complex numbers. Also, solving algorithms. So to become more procedurally fluent, students need practice with algorithms. So in 3rd grade, practicing addition and subtraction algorithms with multi-digit numbers. In 4th grade, practicing multiplication algorithms as well as division. What we thought of as long division, 4th and 5th grade are using those as well. So definitely practicing those at home will really help students solidify those skills. And then math is all around us. So making math relevant in their real world. If they go to the grocery store with you, have them add and subtract the cost. Do we have enough money, or what do you estimate that the cost will be on these items? There's always fractions while cooking. If you're baking brownies, like what are the fractions we need for measuring? The elapsed time on TV shows. See if we can say how long the TV show is and predict the time it's going to end without commercials. Measuring objects, so using a measuring tape, counting the number of objects, how many light switches are in the house, what would it be if it was twice as many? And creating your own mathematical story problems. Let students have fun with that, including siblings' names, family members' names, things like that. They really enjoy creating their own mathematical stories. My email information, this is our math department. Again, my name is Elizabeth Blank. I'm your elementary math supervisor. Here's our elementary math team. These are our boots on the ground people that are out at schools. We help develop teachers through professional development and administrators and all support staff. So again, we thank y'all for spending time with us this evening. If you have any questions, you see my email address is on there. Feel free to reach out.